Welcome to the Business with Beers podcast. This is the place where we help entrepreneurs expand their business, build their wealth, and generate passive income. I'm your host, Brian Beers, an entrepreneur who's on a mission to inspire growth from everyone around me. Remember that you need to take the actions others won't, and you can live the life that others don't. Please be sure to check out my weekly newsletter that now drops every Thursday. It includes one quote, one tweet, one podcast recommendation, plus some business and investing insight from me. It's short and it's sweet. My goal is to provide you with just a couple gold nuggets to help inspire your growth. Go to brianbeers.com to subscribe.
Hey everyone, today we're talking with Ted Pease. I recently helped Ted become an entrepreneur by acquiring a senior care franchise here in the Philadelphia suburbs. Ted is a former active duty vet and currently a Navy Reserve officer. Welcome to the show, Ted.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. So to get started, let's talk about your military background. So when did you get in the military? Kind of what was your role? And let's talk about that first.
Yeah, so I joined a college program back when I was a sophomore, and that college program doesn't really exist anymore, but it considered me active duty enlisted just to go to school. So I got full pay and benefits, and then just had to go to school really. And then now, once I graduated, I went to officer candidate school in Newport, Rhode Island for the Navy, commissioned as an officer, surface warfare officer, and then drove ships for the remainder of my career. So I was actively on ships for about 5 years, intermittent training, and then I was on a shore tour where I taught people how to drive ships for another 3.
Okay, so you're pretty good at driving ships.
I can drive ships for sure.
And then
so that was a lot of fun.
So what year did you then retire and get out of active duty?
Yeah, so I got off of active duty in 2021 and joined the reserves, and then so I moved from California back here. I worked for an insurance company for about almost 2 years, and then found this opportunity and kind of ran with it. So it was a really quick moving target for me in terms of when we found the opportunity to acquisition and getting into it. So
yep. And so I guess, so you got this job. What are some of the things, I guess, why were you kind of looking to quit and pursue, being an entrepreneur? Is it something you always wanted to do, or is it like something else that kind of triggered it?
So I've always kind of wanted the entrepreneurial path. Got my degree in economics, and then when I was on my shore rotation teaching, I got my MBA at night, and my MBA was focused on entrepreneurship. So I really wanted to do that. And I was realizing that a lot of the things that I struggled with in terms of how I wanted to work in big Navy was also the same things that I was struggling with when I was working for another big corporation. I wanted agility. I wanted the ability to move fast and to kind of make things happen. And I wanted kind of efficacy over myself, really was where a large portion of that came from. So, a friend of mine who's running his family business, he gave me a book called Buy Then Build. I read that, and the entire time I was reading that, it was like January of this year, 23. I was like, wow, this makes complete and total sense. And so that's when kind of started that networking thing again, and started rocking on how do I acquire a company, and how do I make it happen.
Okay. So you weren't specifically looking for franchising. You were just saying, hey, let me find a business to buy. And so what else did you kind of look at? Did you look at any others, make any other offers? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, I was actually, I never considered franchising. So I always thought of franchises as, okay, you get a McDonald's, you get a Dunkin' Donuts, whatever, here's your prescribed model, go.
Yep.
I didn't know much about franchising, and I still think there's this myth around it that you're not truly like, oh, you're not a real entrepreneur if you're franchising. And I think that your company, and then getting into this and seeing what the world of franchising holds, is that it's really a scalability conversation. So you have a corporate entity that's helping you then build and scale and giving you opportunities and handling a lot of the burden of stuff that you would probably have to do on your own. So it allows you to take your mind off of, okay, is my website make sense? Is my social media happening? What operating system do I need? What payment processing system? A lot of that is part of your franchise dues, and then you really run your company the way you want to run it. So once I found that piece of it and really understood what that entailed, then it kind of brought me into that world a little bit more. And then you and I spoke, right, at Starbucks down the street.
Yep.
And I was talking about, all right, what I really want is I want service-based, I want people-based. I want to make sure that it's providing a good thing, a good service to people. And you're like, oh, let me go look. And we found this opportunity. He's like, does this fit? And I was like, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So let's go back to like and you got a really good point as like a franchise is kind of like the scaling partner, right? That you've got this partner who can help you grow, and they take care of all this stuff, which if you weren't good at it would suck up a bunch of time and take away from growing sales and operations. And that's like a big part. And I think how I consider my business, and I think probably you now, is like, I run, my company, we run auto repair shops that happen to be, Midas's. Right. You run a senior care, business that happens to be a Right at Home franchise, right? Like, and if you weren't Right at Home and you were whatever, any other competitor, like you would still be you would run your company the way you want to run it. That happens to be this branded, you have to have this branded partner, and like they're lucky to have you kind of as your guy to grow it, right? I think that's like, not that like you operate like a Right at Home or I operate a Midas and everything I do is like because this is what Midas wants to do. Like, no, this is what Brian wants to do in Brian's company. And like, yes, I have to play within these rules and within this box, but that's fine. Like, that's the box I want to play. That's like the sandbox that I want to play in. Like, I don't want to do, body work and glass and stereo systems and all this shit. Like, we just want to stick at like this basic thing and then excel in that. Is that kind of like, I guess, what you've learned and experienced something similar?
Yeah, 100%. And I think even beyond you might not be good at it, even if I'm good at social media and if I was good at marketing, I don't have the scale to be able to run national TV ads. I don't have the scale on my own to be able to buy my place on Google to make sure that when people are researching me, that I come up first when they're looking at my geographic territories. I don't have the scale to be able to afford a consultation law firm that specializes in home care that then can send me documents and send me things and updates. The amount of money and time I'd have to spend on a lot of little things that are super impactful to the business, corporate takes care of. And when you're describing the sandbox, I like that a lot. It says, hey, this is your niche. But you see frequently that people, when they're trying to grow a company, go outside of their swim lanes, and then those kind of take away from what's your core competency. So, for Right at Home, I have to meet care standards first and foremost, and I have some revenue goals that I have to meet. And other than that, my conversation with corporate is, hey, how can we support you? How can we support you? What do you need? Most of the emails, I send somebody an email and I get a response the same day.
Yep.
And faster. So I agree with you that they're there really to make you successful and to allow you as the business owner to go. And they provide great coaching. You get, hey, I'm thinking about going down this rabbit hole. And they're like, well, why don't you go talk to these 3 people that went down that rabbit hole and figure out if that's kind of what
you really want to do, right?
Yeah.
And that the royalty you pay, which is, I don't know, what's yours, 5, 6, something?
It's 5%, and then we do 2% on a brand fund.
So like
million, and then it's 1%. So
so 6, 7, whatever the blended net. It's like you should view that kind of as, hey, this is like an investment. Like I'm getting a return on that. Like it's not that I'm paying whatever, you'll pay $100,000 this year, but that like, hey, I'm okay paying 100 because it would cost me a whole lot more to do it on my own, and my business wouldn't be as big. Like I'd be at $1 million instead of 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever you think you can build it to, right?
And even if you just look at the accounting numbers, okay, the accounting numbers of what does that $100,000 get me? Go try to buy a spot on nighttime news to advertise your brand, right, on a major network.
Yeah.
Tell me how far the $100,000 goes. And then in addition to that, now factor in your time. Yep. Right. So you have to pay somebody to create the ad. You have to pay somebody to edit it. You have to then go try to buy the spot, and you're not doing it at scale. So you're doing a one-off. And then how much time did you suck into that where you could have been doing
sales calls and
meeting
and hiring and training and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
So did you consider franchising before we met? Like, was it on your radar?
Not at all. I viewed it as kind of like,
this is
business ownership, And it really, once you and I spoke about what it was, I understood.
Then it starts to click, and then you kind of like look at it from a different lens, right?
Yeah.
And then cool. So walk us through. So we introduced you to Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's mainline Philly for those who don't know, like really great area. What did that kind of process look like in terms of kind of let's start with like negotiation, the valuation, like kind of talk about like building that relationship and the rapport with him.
So he was an open book, which was great. Any question I had, he got me the information. They've been trying to sell for a while, and so it was good to be able to get in there. I would say that my time understanding how to read a P&L, understanding where efficiencies could come from was super important, and really just being able to dissect. All right, what's the numbers he's sending me on a P&L? When I'm looking at that P&L, what are things that are appropriate add backs, what are not, and then what's a market rate valuation on it. But I think the most interesting part of the discovery process when you're doing it is knowing where, while you're trying to build out that puzzle, knowing where you get an insight into where you can create efficiencies. What's costing a lot? What can I cut costs? What costs should I cut? Or is this a revenue-based thing, or is this a cost factor, right? And of your revenue, you can then go, okay, what's your product mix, right? So are you super top heavy? Do you need a base layer to support of small stuff to support your large accounts, so you aren't dependent on one or two large accounts? And that really was kind of that.
So really understanding, like interviewing him, trying to understand like the economics of the business, how that tied to the P&L, and then probably determining, I think one of the hardest parts is like determining how much what role the owners play, right, in it. Because like if he did a ton of stuff that he wasn't really telling you about, and then now you need to add somebody to supplement, or is it the reverse, right? Does he have all these extra people that like, you could cut, and then, you capture that? Which way did you find for them?
They were doing a ton. So he and his wife were in there. His wife did all of payroll, all of billing, all of kind of HR and hiring and all that good stuff. So that was a piece. And then he was doing all the sales and marketing and branding and that kind of stuff. So I purchased a job, right? I didn't purchase a company as somebody who is outside investor that then somebody else is running it. I am in the day-to-day. And that was what I was looking for, because I wanted to kind of jump in as somebody who was leading, and frankly, where I was economically, I needed a job, not just a pure investment. And also, Right at Home wouldn't select somebody who was a disinterested owner. So Right at Home, you have to be an active owner, and that's one of the requirements of getting in there. So it was understanding who was doing what and where, and were they doing it efficiently? Was their process aligned with getting things done quickly, or did we need to kind of create some efficiency? So, stuff like I was able to move billing and payroll to my office manager and kind of upscope what she was doing, because we were able to learn the process and push that over there. Now we're moving to paperless, where we're using our hiring system and payroll processing system to do a lot of our paper workforce. And so we're getting rid of paper in the office, and just stuff like that that's kind of modernizing or making things efficient, where my best time is spent doing other things than the admin. So
anything you learned, or anything you think, hey, for the next, we go out and acquire another neighbor, we acquire another franchise in a year or two, anything like, did you have a list of anything you're like, shit, I made this mistake, and next time I'm going to make sure I do X, Y, and Z? Or did you feel like, hey, I would have done pretty much exactly the same, maybe just a little quicker?
There was a lot of learning in terms of systems acquisitions and systems transfers, and that was a big learning with me and corporate, because there were a lot of things. So I think there was a lot of time spent.
But on the back end, that's like after you buy it. Anything in the negotiations, or just the valuations, or any of that part?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the pieces that I learned was I was trying to focus on number of clients or total revenue, and it's really billable hours. And of those billable hours, what's the product mix? So
mix, short-term, long-term, Medicaid, like all the different stuff for your specific business. Okay.
What's your hour per customer? How many 16-hour a week clients do you have, and how many full-time live-in clients do you have? And that determines the vulnerability of your base. And so I think I understand that a lot more, and then I also understand what revenue percentage models I need to hit within the operating
to make sense
to know, all right, what's the efficiency gain that I can do by bringing this together, in kind of an economies of scale thing.
Yep. And the revenue mix matters in your business and for somebody else, because you have concentration, right? And I think, you have a living client that could account for a ton of, 20%, one person of your week or whatever it is, right? And you lose, that person dies or whatever happens. And so for, other business models, the same thing, right? One big customer is a huge vulnerability versus like, nobody accounts for more than whatever 5% of it or whatever.
It was really interesting working at my previous company, because what made our unit able to go out and go after some really big fish, and maybe not have a really good margin on those fish, but winning those big fish gives a market signal that we're a player. But what allowed us to do that was we had a huge baseline of really small accounts that we didn't have to necessarily worry about. We weren't paying out claims on them. We weren't doing some of those other things. So it really taught me about, building a base. And that base in my company allows me to get caregivers more hours because we have a higher level of client availability. We have a more diverse geographic area. And then that way, when one of those big clients goes to the hospital or something happens, now we can substitute them into some of these smaller hour clients, and it keeps them as an active caregiver. And that's really where understanding in our business, or at least for me, it was important to really grow that base.
Yep. Okay. So you take this thing over. When did you? What was day one?
June 12th, we closed.
Okay, June 12th. And did the employees know about the sale prior to June 12th?
They found out about a week before.
Okay. So then walk me through kind of the transition. So this guy, Joe's, been in the business, 20 years, right? I think he was like the original franchisee, near retirement, probably getting a little lax on things. You come in hard charging, like ready to rock, right? Talk to me about kind of that culture shift or shock or however you want to say, or how you kind of transition to, the new way that you were going to do things and the expectations that you had that maybe they didn't have on June 11th.
Yeah, it's the change management problem, especially small team change management problem. So, the first couple of weeks was really trying to learn the ins and outs, the day to day, and then it was finding small efficiencies. Okay, hey, I need to do better documentation of prospects that come in. So the first thing that I'm going to do is anybody who calls, we're going to make sure that our prospect list is built out appropriately and that I know who's coming in and I know what our intakes are so we can start that sales process. And so that's just a small example of, I tried to find some key things that were small little processes we could go.
Okay. So you didn't try and change everything on day one. You just try to show me what you're currently doing. And then as you kind of start to see what worked and what didn't work to start to fine tune some of the processes.
And we had some big system stuff too, right? We had, how our recruiting was being handled. We had how billing and stuff was being done. We had how onboarding was being done. So there were some big lifts and that took months of getting used to the big lifts and getting the systems in. And then the little stuff was, all right, how do we tack on one or two things throughout the week? That's just a small incremental change that gets me to where I want us to go.
So then how would you say now, we're in November now, so we're how many months? Five months in or so. Yeah. How much of it has it changed since then? Is it 50%? Is it at 180 completely different? And I guess how much further do you see it need to go before it gets to kind of your vision?
So our product mix is starting to change, which has been one of my key focuses. We're starting to work with the VA, which was really important to me.
Yep.
And we're getting them in. We're transitioning away from Medicaid clients, and so Medicaid doesn't necessarily reimburse well in Pennsylvania. So we're kind of moving that product mix away, and they're pretty administratively heavy. So in the product mix side, that change is happening. We're building out the base. We're getting the appropriate customers. And then on the internal processes, we are getting to paperless. So we're finally getting, all right, cool, here's our systems up. My expectations in terms of client care were client and caregiver care, a big thing. Open communication is a number one priority for me, but that to me, that means transparency. So Our first thing, anything that happens is picking up phone calls and ingraining that idea of we're a fully transparent company has been a cultural push for me that we're starting to get to. So I think that it's been the micro changes, and there's been, okay, let's get the drum beat down so it becomes habit. And I think we're getting there, but there's always a bunch more to improve upon. There's where my nirvana state is, and then there's what's the actual reasonable attainableness of it. And then, is the marginal benefit of getting all the way up there worth it, or can I do that effort somewhere else? And so it's been good. It's been good.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about whatever you're willing to share in terms of kind of sales growth since you took it over to kind of what you're doing now in terms of run rate or whatever you can share?
I would say we're our weekly hours have maintained. We're at least within the steady band, slightly upward trending. But it's been a good product mix. So we've been able to reduce operation costs. We've been able to increase our gross margin, which is really pushing towards some of the programs that I want to be able to do to be a good employer. So we're managing our care brand, right, which is the quality of care that we give to our clients.
Yep.
But my other brand is my employer brand. And what's really important to me is we've got wage and hour employees that we want to become a community resource for. So long term, I'd love to be able to do CNA scholarships for my caregivers so they can go to school and get that CNA cert and earn that next level. We're looking at how to bring in healthcare options for them. So as we're growing and we're doing these margin changes, we're increasing pay rates across the board. That was one of the first things I did. So we're up from about $12 an hour to $14 to $16 an hour. With being able to increase our margins appropriately. So total hours has kind of maintained steady, a base rate, but margins have increased and what we're able to provide as a good employer have increased as well.
Yep. Awesome. And then where do you see, how big do you see this thing for you in your company? Like what's your 5-year plan?
So we have the opportunity to really, really grow. A competitor has about 4 or 5 times the weekly hours that we do with a smaller territory. So our ability to kind of grow is dependent upon our reputation growing within the market.
Yep.
And availability. There's also the ability to expand into skilled nursing. So once we hit our 2 to 2,500 hours a week, that gives us the cash flow to be able to open up our skilled nursing side, and then we can really be a multifaceted solution and be a more complex solution for some of the problems in home care. And some of our healthcare partners. So they are looking for people who can do skilled nursing. They are looking for quality caregivers. So, world's really our oyster in terms of being able to grow just within our territory without even any expansion.
Yeah, 5x, right? Within the same footprint, the same
5x
office,
is
right?
just non-skilled in-home care. Now we add
let alone
skilled nursing,
skilled care.
And we add, there's ways for us to do some ride services. There's a few other revenue streams that we can start building out on that even exceeds just our regular in-home care base. Yeah,
that's an awesome way to look at it. There's that old, I don't know, parable. It's about the diamonds below your feet or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, but that sometimes everything's right below you, right? And sometimes we look outside and get bigger, but getting bigger is not always getting better. Like it could all be right there, and it's just a matter of harvesting, and finding those diamonds, and the business becomes a whole lot more profitable.
You don't need to go to the West Coast to get the pot of gold, but you just got to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and do things a little bit better and all that.
Yeah.
Why do you think veterans can thrive in a franchise system?
Veterans bring a really unique set of skills. And we do tons and tons of training. And a ton of the training that we do, we may not ever use in a kinetic environment. But what it does teach us how to do is we're well prepared to act in quick settings with low information. So we can sit there, we can go, okay, here's the set of information I have. I'm going to go and execute here. And if executing down that path doesn't necessarily work, now it allows us to adjust because we're not beholden to that thing. We go, okay, this isn't working. Let's shift a little bit. We need to go over here. And we're really good at that.
Like sunk cost. You don't have the sunk cost bias.
Not as much. Yeah.
Not as much.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's inherent in anybody. You don't want to, nobody wants to call their own kid an ugly baby, but sometimes I think veterans are more apt to be able to call everybody ugly. And so we're really good at that piece. We're really good at building out operational plans, right? So when somebody thinks of deployment, I worked with the guy who ran the Honor Foundation out in the West Coast during my MBA program. And he has this really great story where he was doing a presentation to some company hiring managers. And he goes, all right, when I say deployment, what do you think of? And, a hiring manager goes, a tent in the desert, right? And that's what average person thinks of a deployment is. But when you talk to a veteran, specifically some of the NCOs, the senior enlisted and the officer side of it, we think of all right, I had to go through an entire personnel readiness thing. I've been tracking the training and readiness of my unit for the last 2 years to be able to do it. What operational support do I need out there? What logistics do I need in terms of how much stuff do I need to get out there? When does it need to get out there? And how do I need it to be able to function when it's out there? And contingency planning. So if stuff goes bad when we're over there, who do I have in the reserve to be able to pull up and support my group? If equipment breaks, how do I get that quickly? And so there's a full set of supply and personnel issues that we have to manage on a day-to-day that really pulls us into business ownership and leadership. And then specifically with franchising, that pulls in where we can thrive in an area, especially if it's our first go at the entrepreneurship side, we can really thrive in an area where we know we can pull this lever and we can get help, because we're used to being able to pull a lever and get some help. And that gives us kind of this security of knowing that there's, big brother behind us supporting us, and we can go forth and kind of conquer. And so I think franchising provides that. It really provides that level of safety in especially transitioning off of active duty. It provides this level of safety that says, all right, I know that I've got support, and I'm not just sitting here calling up my buddy that I think I know, that thinks he knows about HR. I've got a VP of HR I can call and say, I don't know what I need to do.
Yeah, what do I do here? Yep. And then also it's probably the process side of it, right? Like, military, right? Very process driven in a sense of this is how we're going to do it. Obviously you have a sandbox, right? But like you got to stick within it. Yep. And I would imagine in the franchise system, right, where you have systems, you have training, you've got support, like, you think that's part of it too, kind of there's like a personality fit of just comfort, like what you're comfortable with?
Yeah. You get for us, all right, here's your operating system. Okay. Here are your 3 people that you should do billing and payroll with, right? And so I think at least in this world or in this industry, they don't give you the prescribed process. They give you a bunch of tools and you kind of start building out that project. But I know others will give you a process, and it is easier for us to follow that. All right, here's the stamped process of how to get from A to B. But I think that the military can follow a process is definitely something that is helpful, but it's also a small piece of anybody can follow a process, but how do we adapt that process rapidly and quickly? So, your plan won't survive first contact with the enemy. So you can have this great process, but when that enemy shows up, you need to be able to say, all right, we have these 4 processes. How do we, in the time of chaos, how do we make those 4 processes work together, and what do we need to pull? And that's where that's what we're really good at, is pulling in those different processes and training and adapting them to the thing that's now causing the issue.
Yeah. What do you see in terms of like other vet friends kind of transitioning out? Like, do you think other business owners and people kind of give them, like, see the value that you just explained? Or, I don't know, sometimes I hear them say, people say, well, there's no civilian experience. Like, there's no like business experience, but like all the things you just said are like core values. It's really hard to teach somebody that stuff. And like, I don't know, what are your kind of thoughts just on the transition and kind of like existing people, like, and why they should consider veterans for these key, leadership roles?
Yeah. Transitioning off of active duty was the hardest thing I've ever done. I think veterans generally mess up in terms of how early they start that transition process.
Start too late or too soon?
They start too late.
Okay.
You need to start much earlier. And it's that whole idea of 50 cups of coffee. I started about 1.5 years out, and I talked to 2 different people a week within different industries. So I just started deep diving different industries, and I just started reaching out and asking people to tell me their story. And so what I discovered is that same thing. People love saying thank you for your service, but they don't know how to apply you to that business, right? You don't have this industry skill, or, hey, you need to start down here. As a transitioning lieutenant, we're earning 6 figures. And so to say that I need to move back and now I'm going to be earning 60 to 70 grand, it's a hard pill to swallow, especially if you've got kids and a family, you're trying to buy a house. And so if you want to earn into those 6 figures and you want to make that transition at that level, you really have to learn to sell your value. So when I was talking about these values to you, if I'm sitting there saying, I was pulling my ship into a port in Malaysia, and I lost 2 engines and the current was 3.5 knots, and we're trying to figure out how to do this, park this 400 and whatever long ship 100 feet wide, you're like, wow, that sounds really stressful. What does that matter to me? And now it's incumbent upon me to sit there and research your business, right? So, okay, cool. We have this Midas shop. There's a fire in Bay 3. I've got 5 cars in a lot over here. Though 2 guys just quit. How am I making sure that we're continuing to work and getting these cars out and getting sold? All right, cool. Now I need to know my team. I need to know who my resources are. I need to say, I'm going to call my sister company and see if they can send some people over. We're going to send 2 cars over to this other guy with our tow truck and get them serviced over there and then bring them back, right? So it's being able for me to do the research on the industry or the individual or the company to be able to say, all right, let me put this skill set in terms that would apply to you. And I think that's really what veterans need to learn how to do a lot, is to be able to storytell in relating their core values and their competencies to a business owner so that they can understand how that applies. Saying you were a Green Beret that was qualified in the, machine
that means nothing. It's all
doesn't.
It's like, what does that mean
cool,
to me?
Thanks, dude. So you can pull a trigger. I don't know how that helps me do accounting.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think for business owners listening, it's kind of like, asking questions to dig into the underneath of that, right? What's the stressful situation? How did you adapt to it? Like, and then you trying to, like, as the business owner, being responsible for, how can I apply that into kind of my business in terms of leadership and like chaos management and,
right.
Emotional intelligence, like reading the situation, reading people, right? How you adapt. I mean, all that stuff.
It's always incumbent upon the veteran to really do the work. And I want to, it's awesome that if there are business owners that are invested in helping veterans transition or purchase businesses, I think that those people who are invested will take the time to learn. But for me, it's incumbent upon the veteran to learn those skills.
No, you do your part. I'll do my part.
Yeah. I love when the employers want to get in, and it really goes down to, if you're asking behavioral interview questions, just expect, you're going to have to ask kind of the storytelling thing and be able to weed out that storytelling piece a bit from the veteran with those behavioral interview questions, because they're not going to be able to necessarily do a case study that you're going to throw at them to do evaluation on a property.
Yep. What are some organizations that you're familiar with if someone was looking to bring on a veteran in a key like leadership role, like a regional manager? In my case, it was a COO, and that's how you guys met. Like, right. What are some organizations you're familiar with? Someone can find.
So there's a really good one in the Philadelphia area called the Greater Philadelphia Veterans Business Network, GPVN. The guy who runs it is Alex Archowski. The whole goal of GPVN is to increase the economic standing and business standing of veterans in the Philadelphia area. So if you need a veteran to do X, Y, or Z, we have somebody in our Rolodex that can do it. In terms of transitioning veterans, there's a great program called 4Block. And that is even employers can get involved in it. Employers can sponsor it. Employers can host trainings. There's 2 cohorts, one in the fall, one in the spring, and they bring a bunch of veterans in. The one in Philly is virtual, and a company will go in that sponsors it and teach resume writing. They'll teach networking. They'll teach what do you do in your first 90 days. They'll teach salary negotiation. So it teaches you on a weekly basis, gets you exposed to a great cohort of vets, and then you're within that network. So those are the 2, I think, in the Philly area, and 4Block's national, but GPV in the Philly area, that if you're looking for some serious talent, those 2 orgs can help you get some good fits.
Awesome. Cool. Any other kind of final advice for kind of people that maybe, looking to kind of buy that first business, or, advice for someone maybe who's got that job and they're looking to transition out?
Start early, start the conversation, and spend the time to just network. The more people you talk to, buy the cup of coffee, buy the beer, do the 30-minute phone call, you're going to, and instead of the ask of what they can do for you, ask them about themselves, and then ask them to introduce you. And that's going to be your way. Going on Biz Buy Sell is never going to be the way you're going to find anything other than a laundromat. And it's probably hasn't sold in a while for a reason. So if you really want that next thing, spend the time to network, find your local business groups, talk to your local chamber of commerce. They're going to have connections in there that are going to be able to help you find that business that's local, that really fits your need.
Awesome. Cool. Where can people connect with you if they're interested in hearing more about you, kind of your story, maybe learn about right at home or whatever the case is?
Yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Ted Pease. I'm like, be the first one that pops up. You can also go to homecaremainline.com. That's my company website. You can email me from there. Ted at Homecare Mainline. Happy to talk to anybody anytime if they're looking to go down this path. It's been life-changing in so many good ways. I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks again for coming on, sharing your story, and excited to see you continue to grow the business.
Yeah, Brian, thanks so much for everything you do for everybody on this franchising side as well.
All right. Awesome. I'll see you.
That's all we got for this episode with the Business with Peers podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other new potential listeners is to rate the show and leave a comment in iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on your preferred social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find all my links at brianbeers.com. Please just share the podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. And until next time, remember to take the actions others won't, to live the life that others don't.